If you have multiple characters and you need their backstories introduced, first and foremost, I wouldn't necessarily even use the term protagonist here, because there's certain terminology that seems very general but kind of like means very specific things. If you're using multiple characters as important pieces, I'm thinking like of an ensemble cast. The example I'm going to give isn't good, because now I am going back to protagonist. But if we think about Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the reason I use it is because hopefully everybody here has seen it. If you haven't, Asha, please get out from under your rock. But if you've seen Avatar, we obviously have Aang, Sokka, and Katara being the main people that we are tasked with learning, or I should say get the privilege to learn backstory of across the narrative. Toph is a bit interesting because I think rightfully so, because the writers for Avatar were amazing. They did not concern themselves with Toph's backstory once we met her. She was essentially a finished character when we meet Toph. Toph does not change almost at all throughout the story, which I think was a really good decision, because I don't think they should have necessarily been balancing Toph on top of all the other things. But for Aang, Katara, and Sokka, their backstories were introduced all across the narrative. And the way that their backstories were introduced was that elements of the conflict that they had to interact with were designed to evoke and be related to elements of their backstory. For Aang, his backstory, a lot of it came from his pacifism, from being raised as an air nomad, want to stick to his morals and his ideals, and to be a kid. And Sokka's was about his lack of bending and his relationship with his father. And Katara's was her relationship with her mother and her bending. And every single episode, once we got really into season 2 and 3, there was a different focus on a different character where they had to rise to the occasion and they had to individually wrestle, if not in an overt way, a subtle way, with elements of their backstory, right? So that's where we got like stuff like Master Piandao with Sokka, or we got Hama with Katara, and Katara's identity being changed with bloodbending, or Katara going with Zuko to hunt down, what is it, like the raiders? It was individual episodes, which effectively you can think of in books as like chapters. Zuko, yes, I'm reading about Zuko. Zuko's backstory being balanced across all of them, and him really dealing with like that across the entire story. You could almost argue Zuko was just as much of a main character as Aang, if not more. If you need to have multiple characters be introduced as far as like their backstories, what you do is you set up conflict that allows their backstory to be evoked naturally. You don't just shove the backstory in and have them like exposit over like, oh, my life is so difficult and so hard and look at all the things that I had to deal with. You have them meet challenges, and the challenges relate to things that they are like specifically struggling with. And then across your story, eventually you will have stacked up all these things together and the characters will be known to the reader or the audience. Again, much easier said than done, but that's generally the way I would see about like, trying to do the difficult task of, if you have either an ensemble cast or multiple characters just below protagonist status that need their backstory explicated, you would want to go about it individually if possible, because that is a big enough task as it is. Trying to do them all at once, I think is a lot for all but the best writers to tackle.